the story is this. At the end of the Second World War, Americans began focusing on a new enemy, that was communism and the Soviet Union. That led to the creation of the CIA. The CIA decided very early on, mistakenly, that communist powers and communist scientists had uncovered the key to mind control. They'd found a way to seize control of human minds and make people do things at their secret commands. Therefore, the CIA launched an intensive program to try to compete with this. As I said, it wasn't really true that anybody had ever found these secrets because they don't exist. But the CIA went off in this direction. And it began a program called MKUltra, a highly secret program that ran during all of the 1950s, specifically aimed at trying to find ways to control the human mind. In 1951, the CIA hired a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb, a person who faded into total anonymity and lived his whole life completely invisible. Sidney Gottlieb became the chief of the chemical division of the CIA. So he's the chief chemist of the CIA. In this capacity, he also became the director of MKUltra.
First of all, it's just amazing that the CIA has a chemistry department.
Well, Gottlieb had his PhD in chemistry, and I called my book Poisoner in Chief because whenever the US government decided it needed poisons, Gottlieb was the person who could make them. He knew more about poisons than anyone in America. I think maybe more than anybody in the world. So when the United States, for example, decided that we wanted to kill Fidel Castro with poison in 1960, it was Gottlieb who made the pills and the poison fountain pen and the poison wetsuit. When the United States decided we wanted to kill the Prime Minister of the Congo, Patrice Lumumba, in 1960, it was Gottlieb who made the poison kit and brought it over to the Congo. But actually, that wasn't the most important part of Sidney Gottlieb's work. By compounding those poisons to kill foreign leaders, he was essentially just a pharmacist. He was just a really smart chemist who knew how to extract minute amounts of toxin from Alaskan butter clams and compound them into super potent poisons. But another gifted chemist might have been able to do that. Gottlieb's work, it was much more secret, on MKUltra was the real key to what a bizarre life and a bizarre project he was responsible for. So Gottlieb set out on his mission, find the key to mind control, by, in a very scientific way, concluding that if you want to find a way to implant a new mind into someone's brain, you first have to find a way to destroy the mind that's in there. So the focus of MKUltra became, how do you destroy a human mind, or a human body, or a human spirit? Gottlieb asked himself, who knows about this? That's another great scientific step you would take. Like, what data is already out there on the project I'm about to undertake? Who knows about how to torment people, how to destroy their minds, how to poison people, how much poison it takes and how much shock it takes to create certain horrific impulses? Well, the only people that would really know about this would be the doctors from the Nazi concentration camps and their Japanese counterparts. So those people were brought into the CIA and became part of MKUltra. Sidney Gottlieb, who was actually the son of Jewish refugees from Europe, wound up working with these former Nazi doctors in his project of trying to find ways to destroy human beings. So how did he do this? Gottlieb was given the authority to travel around the world to places like Germany and Japan and Philippines, and he could requisition human subjects from the CIA station there or from military police. These were called expendables. They were people who could be tortured and killed. And nobody would notice. Either they were suspected enemy agents or they might be refugees who had no connections to anybody. And they would be brought to secret CIA prisons, one of which I visited in Germany, and made subjects of these horrific experiments. So how would those experiments go? For example, I found one where certain subjects were strapped into sensory deprivation chambers and then fed with overdoses of amphetamines, so they would become hyperactive within their restraints. Then fed mega doses of sedatives that would put them into a coma. And when they were in the transition phase from hyperactivity to comatose, they would be given heavy doses of electroshock to see if all this together might work to destroy their minds. When I visited this one of the safe houses that I think might have been the first ever CIA secret prison in Germany, the young German guy who now owns the building was very accommodating. And he took me down into the basement and he said to me, these storerooms are the cells in which the CIA doctors, along with their Nazi counterparts, cast continuations of the experiments that the Nazis had been conducting a few years earlier in the concentration camps just down the road. And the guy who owns the house also said to me, everybody in this neighborhood, the older people, they know what happened here. It's not a secret. It's been published in a couple of German magazines as well. And they've told me, he said, that the bodies of the people who were experimented to death are buried in places that are now covered up with shopping malls and apartment blocks all around here. So Gottlieb had what amounted to a license to kill issued by the US government. And in pursuit of his MKUltra mind control project, he carried out the most intense and extreme experiments on human beings that have ever been conducted by any agent or authority of the US government.
Why? What is the purpose of mind control? And why the hell would the CIA want to control people's minds?
Alan Dulles, the director of the CIA, had concluded that if you could make people in other countries behave as you wanted them to, you wouldn't have to kill them. But I think the deeper question is, what led them to believe that this was possible? And I think there are two answers. One of them has to do with a few specific episodes that happened. There was the story of this Hungarian cardinal who was placed on trial by the communists and spoke in a very monotonous voice and with glazed eyes and confessed to crimes that he obviously hadn't committed. It later turned out he had been coerced by the same means that people have been coercing prisoners with since forever, but we didn't believe that. We thought that he had been mind controlled somehow. The same thing happened with the release of our prisoners from Korea. A number of them had said good things about communism and confessed to committing war crimes. We thought the only way they could have done this is if they had been brainwashed somehow. So it was it was false interpretation of events. But I think there was something even bigger than that, something that was behind that. I think those seeds fell on fertile soil, and that fertile soil was cultural conditioning. Think of all those stories about mind control. It's a fantastic trope for fantasists. You drop a pill into someone's drink. I mean, how many books, how many movies and stories have come out of the swinging watch that makes you hypnotized? There's been Edgar Allan Poe stories and Sherlock Holmes stories and movies like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Gaslight. These guys in the early CIA grew up in this culture. And I think they confused the line between reality and fantasy. They began to think that what screenwriters and novelists could imagine, any scientist could make real. And so that's what they hired Sidney Gottlieb to do. Find out how to do this in real life. And the justification was, it's all defensive. They're doing it. We need to do it to save ourselves. And I do believe this is one of the lessons of MKUltra for today. So what led them to feel that it was all right to go to these extremes? I think it was their fear of the threat that was out there, we had convinced ourselves that Soviet communism was endlessly and ceaselessly plotting our total destruction, that that apocalypse could happen at any moment, and that once the Soviets struck, not only would America be destroyed, but the entire possibility of fulfilling life on Earth would be over forever. With the stakes that high, the loss of a few lives or even a few hundred lives would seem like a very small price to pay. And the lesson, I think, is that you can always work yourself into an exaggerated threat mode where you think that, well, we always as a nation abide by ethics and morality and laws, but there have to come some very extreme circumstances where temporarily we have to leave that behind. But the temporarily never seems to end. And now we're again in a situation with world terrorism and all the threats we're faced where we're told, well, civil liberties can't be respected quite the way we normally would like to because we're facing an extreme threat. So commitment to a great cause is the most powerful motivation to commit immoral acts. And there's no cause that's more seductive than patriotism. I think this is what brought people like Sidney Gottlieb and his bosses at the CIA into the mindset that even the extremes of MKUltra would be justified.